April 1945. The final days of World War II were upon Germany. The once formidable nation was now a shadow of its former self, struggling to hold on as the Allies closed in from all sides. The skies over Germany were filled with the constant drone of Allied bombers, a relentless reminder of the impending defeat. The skies over Germany were full of the noise of Allied bombers. Day and night, these bombers flew missions to cripple the German war machine, targeting factories, railways and cities. The destruction was immense, and the German people could do little but watch as their world crumbled around them. The once mighty Luftwaffe, the pride of the German Air Force, was in ruins. Fuel was low, and the aircraft that remained were often outdated and outmatched by the superior Allied planes. The Luftwaffe, which had once dominated the skies of Europe, was now a mere shadow of its former self, struggling to defend the homeland. There weren't many experienced pilots left. The Luftwaffe had lost many of its best and brightest in the long years of war. In their place were young, inexperienced pilots, hastily trained and sent into battle with little hope of survival. These young men faced overwhelming odds, flying outdated aircraft against a relentless enemy. Germany losing the war was certain. The cities lay in ruins. The infrastructure was shattered, and the morale of the people was at an all-time low. The once proud nation was on the brink of collapse, and the end of the war seemed inevitable. Yet, amidst the devastation, there were still those who clung to a glimmer of hope, a desperate desire to fight on. But even though defeat was coming, there was still a little bit of fight left. The German military, though battered and bruised, was not yet ready to surrender. Soldiers prepared for battle with a grim determination, knowing that the end was near but refusing to go down without a fight. A desperate plan was made. In the face of overwhelming odds, the German High Command devised a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the war. This plan was bold, risky, and born out of sheer desperation. It involved a new unit, one that would carry out a mission unlike any other. The Sonderkommando Elbe was formed. This special unit was composed of volunteer pilots, many of them young and inexperienced. Their mission was simple yet deadly: to ram their aircraft into Allied bombers, causing as much damage as possible. It was a suicide mission, a final act of defiance in the face of certain defeat. Its mission, to damage the Allied bombers as much as possible, no matter the cost. These brave pilots took to the skies, knowing that they would likely not return. Their sacrifice was a testament to the desperation and determination of a nation on the brink of collapse. The twilight of the eagles had come, and with it, the end of an era. The Sonderkommando Elbe wasn't a normal fighter squadron. Their mission wasn't to fight other planes or attack targets. It was much more desperate, much more final. They were to become human missiles. Their orders: to fly their stripped-down Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters into the big B-17 flying fortresses that filled the German skies. They would have a chance to jump out, but surviving wasn't likely. It was a suicide mission, barely disguised as a military necessity. Sergeant Klaus Hahn was only 19 years old. He was just a boy when the war began, but the years of conflict had aged him beyond his years. The weight of the world seemed to rest on his young shoulders, and the horrors he had witnessed had left an indelible mark on his soul. He had seen the destruction of his country, the once vibrant cities reduced to ghostly remnants of their former selves. The relentless bombing raids had turned bustling streets into desolate wastelands, and the echoes of explosions still haunted his dreams. The constant bombing raids that turned cities into piles of rubble were a daily reminder of the fragility of life. Each day brought new devastation, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and the cries of the wounded. Klaus had lost friends, family, and neighbors to the unending onslaught. Driven by a sense of duty and despair, he volunteered for the Sonderkommando Elbe. It was a unit formed for a desperate mission, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of the war. Klaus knew that joining this unit meant accepting a near-suicidal mission, but he felt he had no other choice. His heart was heavy with the knowledge that this might be his final act of service. It was a decision made out of desperation, a last attempt to protect what was left of his world. The thought of doing nothing while his homeland was torn apart was unbearable. He couldn't stand idly by and watch everything he loved be destroyed. The determination in his eyes was a reflection of the inner turmoil he felt. He knew the risks. knew he probably wouldn't survive. The mission was perilous, and the odds of returning were slim. But Klaus was resolute. He spent countless hours preparing, going over every detail, every maneuver, knowing that his life depended on it. The night before the mission, he sat alone, contemplating the path that had led him here. But he also knew that he couldn't just stand by and watch his country be destroyed. The images of the ruined cities, the faces of the people he had lost, fueled his resolve. He was determined to fight back, to make a stand, even if it meant sacrificing his own life. Klaus Hahn's decision was not just about duty, it was about hope, about the belief that one person could make a difference, even in the darkest of times. On April 7th, 1945, Hahn took to the skies for what might be his last flight. He flew his stripped-down Bf-109, made lighter for speed towards a group of B-17S. Among the American bombers was one flown by First Lieutenant Bud Wentz and his crew. Wentz, a young man himself, was on his 24th mission. He had faced danger before, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen. Against all odds, the survival of Bud Wentz. Hahn's Bf-109 crashed into Wentz's B-17 with a terrible noise. The crash ripped through the bomber, badly damaging it. Wentz and his crew fought hard to stay in control. They were losing height, their bomber leaving a trail of smoke and broken pieces. Then, incredibly luckily, Wentz saw it, an empty airfield below. With skill and a lot of luck, Wentz managed to land the damaged B-17. They had survived. Tears of joy and regret, a reunion decades in the making. This is the story of Klaus Hahn and Bud Wentz, two men whose lives were forever changed by the events of World War II. They were on opposite sides of the conflict, yet their paths crossed in a way that neither could have anticipated. Decades later, they would meet again, not as enemies, but as old men seeking closure and understanding. Many years later, long after the fighting had stopped and the pain of war had started to heal, Klaus Hahn and Bud Wentz met again. The meeting took place at a memorial site, a place that held deep significance for both men. It was here that they could finally confront the ghosts of their past and find some measure of peace. The handshake they shared was more than just a greeting. It was a symbol of reconciliation and mutual respect. It was an unlikely reunion, arranged by historians and driven by a shared wish to understand what happened that day. The historians had spent years piecing together the events that led to their encounter, and they knew that bringing these two men together could provide invaluable insights. For Hahn and Wentz, it was an opportunity to fill in the gaps in their memories and to finally make sense of the chaos they had experienced. When Hahn learned that Wentz and his crew had lived, he cried. The weight of the years of guilt and sorrow he had carried was overwhelming. He had spent so long believing that he was responsible for their deaths, and the revelation that they had survived was almost too much to bear. His tears were a release, a way to let go of the pain that had haunted him for so long. They weren't tears of sadness, but tears of joy and relief. For Hahn, knowing that Wentz and his crew had survived was a gift he never expected to receive. It was a moment of profound emotional release, a chance to finally forgive himself for the actions he had taken during the war. The smile on his face, even through the tears, spoke volumes about the depth of his relief and happiness. He had lived for years thinking he had killed those young men. The burden of that belief had shaped his life in countless ways, affecting his relationships, his sense of self, and his ability to find peace. Every day he had carried the weight of that guilt, and it had taken a toll on him. The reunion with Wentz was a chance to finally lay that burden down and to start healing. Knowing they had survived filled him with a deep sense of gratitude and remorse. Gratitude for the chance to make amends and remorse for the years lost to guilt and sorrow. The reunion was a powerful reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the capacity for forgiveness and healing. It was a moment that neither man would ever forget, a testament to the enduring bonds of shared experience and the power of reconciliation. The weight of war, reflections on loss and forgiveness. The reunion of Hahn and Wentz was a powerful example of how people can forgive and make peace. It showed the complicated and sometimes conflicting feelings that remain long after war's end. Both men, connected forever by what they went through, realized they had been caught up in a much bigger conflict, victims of a war that had put them in an impossible situation. The enduring hope for peace. The story of Klaus, Hahn and Bud Wentz is a sad reminder of what war does to people. It is a story of bravery and sacrifice, of loss and survival. But most of all, it is a story of hope. It reminds us that even in the worst times, even in the terrible cruelty of war, the human spirit can survive. It shows us that forgiveness is possible, even when the hurt is deep. A legacy of reconciliation. The tears Klaus Hahn cried that day weren't just for himself. They were tears for everyone who fought and died in the skies over Europe. They were tears for a generation hurt by war, for a world that desperately wanted peace. His story, and the story of his unlikely friendship with Bud Wentz, shows the power of forgiveness and the